We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Jonesboro Land Bank Commission for August the 14th, 2018. And we're going to do a roll call.
Ms. Durham.
Present.
Mr. Hurden.
Present.
Mr. Hollywood.
Present.
Mr. Martin.
Present.
Mr. Mills.
Present.
Mr. Moore. Absent. Mr. Osment.
Here.
Dr. Warner.
Here.
And Mr. Zolper.
Here.
We got a quorum.
We have a quorum. So the first order of business is approval of the last month's minutes, July 10th. Would anybody like to review those or make a motion?
I make a motion to approve July 10th minutes.
Everybody has a copy for your review. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes stand approved as submitted. And so we're going to go into some old business. I'm going to turn this over to John for just a few minutes. The first order of business is revitalization areas. Just to give a little bit of information to those of you who haven't been here, in the first two meetings of the commission, we have looked at various areas of the city, not actually gone out and looked at those. That will come up in a bus tour here in the near future. But we have looked at different parts of the city that might be beneficial for revitalization sort of strategies that the land bank has at their disposal. So I'm going to let John talk about this for a couple of minutes. That's all right with everybody.
I gave everybody another copy of the land use plan, just for reference, just in case you didn't bring your copy. We, as Dr. Warner mentioned, have been looking at areas that we might consider for revitalization. That doesn't mean we can't accept properties from outside of those focus areas. It just means that we're going to try to spend as much of our resources in them as we can. Anyway, long story short, we've been looking at these different areas, and they match some of the areas that are also identified for redevelopment as the land use plan. And if you look on the back page of that document that I gave you, you'll see that this plan was put together with input from several city departments as well as different industry leaders and citizens in Jonesboro. And me and Dr. Warner and James, we sit down and we were talking, and we felt like this would be a good guide, as far as where we can start focusing resources. If we feel like we need to change our focus later on, we can always do that. But given the amount of input and the different citizens and staff that put this plan together, and the fact that it's really the only plan that's currently adopted by the city of Jonesboro that's guiding development right now, we felt best that we could use this kind of as our first guiding tool and see how it goes. Has anybody got any questions, or have y'all had a chance to look at those areas? If you have questions, I'll answer them.
Anyone have any question or comment? I think I don't necessarily think I'll have to have a motion just to discuss this for a couple of minutes. Does anybody want to open a discussion or have a question?
And I guess I could point out too, not only does it identify areas for potential redevelopment, if you read through there in different sections, it gives some suggestions and future ideas that staff can use or that this committee could use to potentially help us in our revitalization efforts, which is another reason why we could start using this as a guide if y'all guys want to.
This be a good document to use since the city is already using this plan. We have developers that's already in these areas that are focusing in these areas that we have presented.
I might bring this out as well, and Jeff may want to comment on this a little bit from our visit to Little Rock to their land bank. But I think that one of the takeaways that we learned at that meeting was that they initially started out doing projects all over the city. I think John made it plain a while ago that we can accept inventory properties from anywhere in the city. But what the Land Bank Commission in Little Rock shared with us in the workshop we had there was basically that if you limit to certain areas, you can make an impact. So I hope that's what you all are thinking you want to do. And I just asked Jessica, and we've talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. I think this does require some action on our part to identify these as our revitalization areas. So if anyone is of the mind to move in that direction, you certainly can make a motion to do so.
I make a motion to accept the revitalization areas that is included in the land use plan.
I'll second the motion for purposes of discussion.
And just for clarification, James, in your motion, I think John's got on the agenda here to include North Jonesboro. I don't know that that's necessarily part of the land use plan, but it is part of our discussions in the past. So is that included in your motion as well? The three areas that are mentioned here as they're written, is that what you want to do?
Yes. I make a motion to,
Dennis, are you okay with that as well for discussion purposes?
I assume we're talking about the Johnson Avenue, G Street, Old Nelton area.
Yeah, these three bullet points that are
That's
on your
fine.
agenda. Okay, so that is now open for discussion, so we'll entertain discussion on this motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm a little unsure. I know we have Johnson Avenue, G Street, Old Nelton area, but that's huge areas. Are we going to depict them in a smaller, more contiguous method? In other words, Johnson Avenue, I mean, that could go all the way from out at Riceland all the way down to 351 down to Paragould.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm going to let John answer that, or at least discuss it with you.
On the bullet points, it is kind of vague, but if you look on the land use plan, there is a defined area. There's a map that should be in that document. And if you look on that map, essentially it's color coded. So even though I just put, Johnson Avenue or downtown corridor or whatever, if you look on that map, it is very specific as to where that corridor is at. I can't sit here and tell you the exact boundaries of the roads, but it is in the map, or it is located on the map.
Man, so you got it.
page 7, I think he's referencing to.
No.
I don't have one like you do.
Give us just a minute. We're going to try to show you the exact map so we're not being vague.
It should be page 16 in your booklet,
You got that other book list.
and I'm hoping it's in there. We were having issues when it printed off.
Oh, okay. I was
I will
looking
need-
at it and I thought it was wrong. Okay.
Jonathan, I'll need my copy back because the land use plan I have doesn't have
I need a map.
page numbers nor a map showing.
If you can look at your computer screens or look at the projector behind me, I'll pull it up for you.
Oh, okay.
It's not in there.
Is there additional discussion while we're doing that? Does anybody else have another comment or a question?
Okay, right. All right. Well, I thought I would pull it up in one page, but it's split in half. All right, so I apologize because this is split in 2 pages. This is half of the map that's on page 15. And you can see, let's go down to page 16. All right, here we go. Well, that's not helping either. If you see where my mouse is hovering, wish I had this.
Okay.
It's okay, just go ahead.
Right here, this is the West End, the old West End area. My mouse is hovering over that. You can tell it's color coded a little differently. It's printed off better on our maps upstairs. this right here.
Hey, Jonathan, it's hard to read these.
Yeah.
Can you give us the street lines, where those lines are, what street that is, for us to have a point of reference?
So the first one, the ASU downtown corridor, on the plan, it identifies it from, I believe, Washington or maybe Matthews, all the way to Johnson on the other side of the railroad tracks, and then from Bridge Street to ASU. So that's what it shows on the plan. We're actually going to identify it, though, for our purposes, as going all the way to like Belt Street. So from Washington on one side of the railroad tracks up to include North Jonesboro. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that's ASU corridor, correct?
The ASU
All right.
North Corridor there. In the west end, it's going to go from Nettleton to the railroad tracks by Huntington and Cruson, where kind of Rosslin's at, and then Main Street down to, I believe, G Street. And then the old Nettleton area, this is one that I'm going to have difficulties with. It's the Nettleton Baptist Church, or I guess the former Nettleton Baptist Church there at the S-curve. It includes Gordon Street, School Street, you know where those areas are?
So that would be like Nettleton, old Nettleton town would be the east boundary,
Yes.
right? And then you would have maybe Highland Drive, second on the
It
north.
would not go that far over. It would end kind of where those S-curves are at, by Nettleton,
By the Baptist
by the
Church.
Baptist Church, I believe.
What is a joy?
Well, and just in the way of asking a question, we would have a second option, as opportunity to limit this as you look at the various properties that are presented to the land bank. So it's not like that you're, I mean, I'm asking this as a question, but so there's a opportunity, say, just across one of these streets outside of the
Yeah.
quote area, the commission still would have the ability to embrace that, correct?
Yes, sir.
On an individual basis of
Yeah.
these properties.
Yeah. Let's see if this map will work a little better.
So what we're kind of looking for is general guidelines, I guess, Dennis, as to areas.
So here you go. This is a little better map. So this is the older map. So we haven't actually got Old Nettleton color coded on here. But you can see the west end and you can see the ASU downtown corridor. But we're also going to incorporate this smaller section up here, up to like Belt Street, North Jonesboro. Can y'all see that better?
That's going to be your northern boundary?
Yeah, Belt, up there where like Success School is. I believe Success School will be like right here.
I don't want to beat it to death, but back on Old Nettleton, I'm just trying to have an understanding of what that, because the S-curve, I'm trying to get a square in my mind or whatever it is so I can have an understanding of that area. And that S-curve would be an eastern boundary that I would think that would go, I'm just trying to get it clear in my mind what that area, I got the other two crystal clear. If anybody else understands what it is and can articulate it, help me. You know, I'm trying to get
I can get it for you a little more definitive when I get back to the office. Right here, we're kind of limited.
Okay, Nettleton Baptist is on the east side,
right.
right? Or that's the west. That's the east side. Then west is going all the way.
I believe toward
The
like Ray
industrial
Street,
Parker?
like Ray Street area.
Wolf would be, Red Wolf would be the what, I mean, something over, that runs north and south, correct? Yes. So you won't, I don't know that that's it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm thinking Nettleton over to Red Wolf, those both run north and south, and then you would need an east and west. So are we talking about Ray Street and Highland Drive? I'm just trying to figure out what that square is, or if it's a triangle or whatever.
I don't want to lie to you, man. My stuff here is not showing anything. So,
Fair enough.
but I can get a better description for you after this.
Mr. Chairman, my next question is, these are still fairly large areas. Is our obligation now to pick one out of the three? as our initial thrust, or is it all three are our initial thrust?
I think in the last meeting, we talked about that a little bit and thought we could narrow it down to 2 or 3 areas. So we don't have to be in one particular area. It'll give us more opportunities. Was that the consensus that you all got? You all remember? That's what I remember.
That's the way I remember is if you're going to get any impact out of it, we need to focus.
And then it's what we also, I think, I mentioned this a little earlier. I don't think you were here for that either, but
That wasn't
Yeah,
for the
but-
last meeting.
But anyway, the issue was that we would accept inventory from different parts of the city, even if they weren't in these areas.
Yes,
If these would be improvement areas that we would try to concentrate on for impact.
and I did read that in the minutes, and I think that's
Yeah.
excellent.
Well, that came from the Little Rock visit. When they first started, they limited taking inventory in from just a certain area, as you remember, and they also tried to improve that area. And they said that was a huge error. It took them about 4 or 5 years to sort out that wasn't the way to do it. And so and they gave a great example. A gentleman had a piece of property that was really quite valuable that it was to his advantage to donate it. And so they got their hands on that, and then they were able to develop it, and it really kind of got them set up in that area.
Good.
So we have a motion on the floor with a second. James or Dennis, do either one of you guys want to amend it at all as far as the motion goes? Are y'all satisfied with how you've said it? Basically, we're looking at these 3 areas that John has put on the agenda here: ASU downtown with North Jonesboro, the West End, and the Old Nelton area, which is going to be better defined, I guess, by a map that we'll send out to you this afternoon, probably by email.
I don't have any problems if James doesn't.
No amended.
I'll move for the question.
All right, I'm going to just ask you, since this is our first important action, I'm going to just ask, was there any other discussion at all? Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And as I say, the realistic part of this is that you will have chances at each individual transaction of properties or improvements to, once again, make your wishes known about how we do that. So, okay. And we're going to talk about the bus tour for just a minute. I think we have set a time and a date for that. I remember the 24th, correct? Yes, sir. So August the 24th at 9:30. We are going. You all, as the commissioners, will get the first invitation to be on board. We can take about 20 some odd folks, and we're going to ask City Council if they would like to join us for that tour. We'll have the press with us as well, and the mayor will be there. And our intent is to kind of actually go visualize these areas that y'all just passed. So that will be 9:30 on the 24th. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I have a prior conflict. But Jonathan, this is more directed to you. Once you know what the bus route's going to be, if you could send that out to us, for those of us who might not be able to be there on the bus tour, we could at least tour the area that you are going to tour.
And do it on your own.
On our own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
So I'm going to move on then, if I can, to new business and turn this over. We've added this, by the way, to the agenda. James and John and I met about this week, and we are going to start reporting some finances to you. And so that's what this next segment's about. You want to?
I'll probably defer all questions to Bill since he's more knowledgeable about this. But essentially what this was something that Little Rock is doing. They try to provide accounts and the balances to those accounts to all of their commissioners. So when you're making decisions, you'll know how that impacts our finances. Obviously, you see land and improvements. That's something that's a line that we added this year after the budget was already approved. I'll let y'all look at that, and if y'all have any specific questions, me or Bill One can answer them for you.
And then during this segment, Tiffany, can I put you on the spot now? Is it okay? I was going to ask Tiffany to comment as well for some information for the commission regarding some other sources of funding that might be available in the future. We had a little conversation about that this week. Is that okay for you do you mind? Does everyone know Tiffany Callaway? Yeah, well, you might tell them what your job is, though, because I get your title wrong.
I introduced myself to the
every time.
commission. I'm Tiffany Callaway, and I know most of the commission. I'm Director of Community Development for the city. Have the responsibilities of overseeing our grants department and community development functions. So working with mayor on community engagement projects. Dr. Warner and I visited this weekend. We discussed home funds. Home funds is very similar to CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds that the city currently receives. We do not receive any home funds. Little Rock has been extremely successful in their land bank because they are a recipient of home funds. And what that allows for the Little Rock Land Bank to do is to work in conjunction with the community development partner and really do some revitalization in areas, specifically for low to moderate income residents in Little Rock. So with these home funds that the city of Little Rock receives, they're able to help nonprofit organization build homes. So all my life I've been taught to get out of poverty, to move into the middle class, it's home ownership. And so what they're doing is wealth creation in the city. I think they receive approximately a little under $1 million. And so here's an example. They will give a CHODO, a community housing development organization. These organizations are developed by assistance from the community development department within a city. So a CHODO, which is essentially a nonprofit organization that helps individuals get homes, a CHODO essentially is awarded funding from the city of Little Rock, okay? So the CHODO will get $130,000 from the city to build a home. This CHODO, in turn, sells the home to an individual who's low to moderate income for $125,000. So the CHODO makes $5,000, but they're able to put that and reinvest it to build another home for an individual. So that's how they're addressing poverty issues, and that's how the land bank is working in conjunction with the community development division in Little Rock. So the city of Jonesboro has never received home funds. We're investigating and trying to figure out how we can get those funds. With us being the 5th largest population in the state and having the 2nd largest land mass next to Little Rock. So we're in the process of having those conversations. It is a process. It's not something we're going to get overnight. I've been engaging Little Rock. They are experts in home programs. And I've also been engaging ADFA. Arkansas Development Finance Authority is the beholder of the funds of home programs for the state of Arkansas. So any questions?
In order to be approved for these funds, do you have to show like real estate that we have that's not good?
No, it's based on population. It's based on poverty level. There's several factors that it's based on, but the decision comes from the field office in Little Rock. So I've been engaging Clinton Johnson is actually the director, and so we're in the process, but it's a long process.
Oh, okay.
Habitat is already involved with that program. They're funding 12 houses of our current program.
Mm-hmm. They are. And they're going through ADFA. ADFA is the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. So any organization that doesn't receive HUD funds directly, such as the city of Little Rock, they can go to ADFA. But we want to cut the middleman out and try to get the funds directly to our city. And then that way we're able to do projects that we see fit for the city.
In that same vein, this is, if we have a nonprofit such as Habitat who is already building homes for low and moderate income families, instead of having another layer of bureaucracy and having more fees going to administration, why would we not use that entity as a nonprofit, still obtain home funds if possible, and then use that money to give it to them to build homes?
So they could apply to be an eligible CHODO. There's actually a CHODO already in Craighead County, and that's the Crowley's Ridge Development Council. And they do a lot of work throughout their 13-county region, providing home ownership opportunities. But you're right, Habitat could definitely apply, for Choto status. And so they will be a great organization to work with. But we want to also offer it to other nonprofits in the area. There are some nonprofits now that are working on home ownership programs. So it wouldn't just be limited to Habitat, but to all nonprofits who are helping make the realization of home ownership possible.
So Tiffany, while you're still up here, Dennis, let me say this, and Jeff or James or whoever helped me with this, but as I recall the example we saw in Little Rock, there was a lot that was sold from the land bank to a developer for a very, very good price.
Yeah, I remember.
$1,000, you
Yeah.
remember this? And the developer was able to build the house and sell it for somewhat of a profit for him. But the land bank really didn't make a profit off of that
Right.
in the sense of money profit. It was certainly a victory for revitalization, but it wasn't, am I remembering that example correctly for the most part?
Yeah, so land bank isn't designed to be, what you guys already know, that to be an income producing entity. So you're.
Yeah, and the reason I make the comment is because of your comment a while ago about that you could sell, Choto could sell for maybe a little bit more money. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think there will be some instances when the land bank will see some income from some of these projects, but that's not the goal.
So
That's accurate.
as far as the community development department standpoint, until we acquire those home funds, that's where we really can see a big opportunity. Now,
Make an
Dr.
impact.
Warner, make an impact. You also asked about other grant fundings. I encourage you guys to look. If you see anything online that could possibly benefit the land bank, you let us know. I have a grant writer on staff, and that's her day-to-day responsibilities. But there are a lot of private foundation dollars that are available as well. So I encourage you guys as a commission to look into that as well.
And I appreciate that comment because that's where I was going next. I was going to ask you, Tiffany, I visited a little bit about exactly what you just said. I think that they do a wonderful job of searching for money for the whole city, for the parks, for everybody. And so if we do have some ideas, we can float that through your department. You'll help us. And then y'all will keep your eyes open as well for funds. So that's, I just wanted to get a little knowledge to everybody about other sources of income for what we were trying to do.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Bill, please.
And Jonathan alluded to this, what we did this year is we simply put in an amount of money for professional services, which we anticipated for primarily legal fees, and then condemnations and demolitions, which that was just a guess, and we didn't know if we really would have any activity this year. But what might be helpful is if the commission, and possibly after the bus tour, you might have a better idea, but come up with a recommendation for a budget for next year, because we're in that process right now. So it might be worth getting your feedback in terms of a couple of those categories, primarily the land and improvements, because that's the amount that we did not budget this year, because we really didn't anticipate any direct acquisitions. So if you want to go on the tour, possibly come up with a list in those target areas of what you think a reasonable amount that we might want to include in the budget for next year, and then we'll take that into consideration as we go through the budgeting process internally.
What's the timeline for that, Bill, as far as when do you?
We hope to have the budgets more or less solidified mid-October, but preferably if we could get feedback from the commission, maybe the middle of September, give us an opportunity to look at the numbers and then maybe come back with kind of where we think we might end up, and we can talk about it some more. But again, I think that'd be helpful if we got some feedback from this group as part of incorporating that into the budget.
Okay. Any questions?
Bill, yeah, I do have a question. On professional services, you mentioned legal. I assume that the city attorney's office will be doing the legal work for this commission?
Well, and Jessica can answer that as well. It was kind of a mixed bag. We thought there would be some outsourced legal and then some internally. We weren't sure what the mix of that would be.
That's correct. When we were envisioning the land bank, Carol and I had a discussion that depending on the amount of foreclosures we were talking about, that would eat a lot of time for two attorneys. given the duties our office currently has, we might have to have some outside help doing some of those things. At this point, we're in the process of maybe looking at some foreclosures and figure out what we want to do. So I don't know where that's going to end up. It depends on the amount of workload given that we're 2 people in an office. If that makes sense, Dennis.
Yeah, to some extent.
If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I would think that there might be some need for some environmental look at. Some of these properties may have had some bad history on them, and you may need that kind of service.
Yeah, and I was thinking as well, there may be some other legal issues more than just that with certain properties and the use of the properties too. So I think there. But I don't think you got your question answered though.
No, I didn't. But
So
I think this is sort of a trial and error. We'll see what happens. Mostly foreclosures are form related. I mean, once you get your forms down, it's just plugging in variables.
Right, and Carol and I, it's not that we're not prepared to do that. It's we don't know the volume at this point, and that's why we kind of put it in the front end. It may be something we handle. It may be something we farm out. We don't know yet.
Well, and there was another example, I keep alluding to this, we learned so much in Little Rock. Mm-hmm. They had I want to say it was a community garden that they wanted to put in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood association approached them for the property. There were some environmental issues. Jeff, is that right? I think. But at any rate, they moved to another piece of property, and that required some legal expertise as well to figure that out. And so I think there may be a broad-based need for some legal help, and we'll just have to sort through what Jessica and Carol can do versus getting some outside help as needed. Is that a fair answer?
That's correct.
And I agree that there could be environmental issues, possibly. And I assume accounting issues, you'd be doing your own internal accounting for this commission as you do other commissions. Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions in regards to that, or for Bill or anyone, or Jessica or anybody about the accounting that we're going to begin to report? So if everybody just kind of be pondering the idea that we might want to give a budget number or some thought about budget here in the very near future, so we can get that incorporated, what Bill and them are doing. I'm going to move down to 5B, letter of interest. And I'm going to let John sort of open this discussion a little bit, but I'll preface it by this comment. The last meeting, we talked about bringing the commission a list of potential properties and sending out letters of interest after the commission approved those letters. And then John and I met this week and began to look at that, and I'm not sure that's a wise move. You maybe end up approving hundreds of letters. And so what we wanted to open this discussion this way and say that if you all are okay with it, what we might want to do is let John and them send out some letters to these areas that we've identified. When they find a property that they believe might fit our strategy, then let them vet it to a certain level and then bring it to us for approval after that. I'm only saying that we should do this to maybe manage everyone's time a little better. We could easily foresee a very long meeting if you're going to approve lots and lots of letters, and that's what it takes to get a few that might find some owners that might be interested in donating a property or helping us with our strategy. So that was kind of the thought. John, you want to add to that a little bit, or?
Well, there was really 2 other things that I was concerned with. Number one, some property owners may not really be interested in being a part of this program, and I was hesitant to put their property on a public agenda if we've not even contacted them about any of this. And I didn't want to start any issues that way. And then the second thing is, as he alluded to, I can present whatever amount of properties every meeting that y'all want, whether that's 10 or 15, y'all pick the number. But once I send those letters out, if I don't get a response back, then I'm stuck until next month. It doesn't take a month to write up whatever amount of letters, right? The work's going to happen when they respond. And if people don't respond and I'm stuck getting 10 letters approved every month or 20 letters approved, however many y'all guys want to approve, it's going to kind of limit the amount of work that I can do administratively on a month-to-month basis. So that's why we're asking to just allow me to focus in these areas that y'all have identified. And when I get a response back from a property owner, and that property owner is willing to potentially be a part of this program, that's when I'll put them on the agenda, and y'all can review the information at that point.
Can we just open this for some discussion? We sort of discussed this the last time without any kind of a motion. Do y'all have questions or discussion about this?
Mr. Chairman, I assume we're talking about donated property since we don't have any money to buy any property.
Well, I'll let John address it in a little more detail, but the issue is to send out a letter to, say, you or whoever that has a property that gets on our radar screen and say, would you think about donating this? Absolutely.
Okay.
Am I answering that correctly, John?
Well, this is where I'm going to refer to a little bit to Bill, but again, we created this land and improvements, right, to purchase potential properties in the future. We haven't got anything in the budget for this year, but correct me if I'm wrong, we created this account to go essentially negative this year, and we're going to try to use that information to help with our budgeting for next year.
Yeah, we wouldn't go negative. What we would do is we would deviate and amend the budget. If you found property or properties that you felt like were timely and good acquisitions, then we would go ahead and amend the budget for this year and include that so that you could have the ability to purchase those. So don't let that hamstring you from being able to do the work on the commission as the budget is set out today.
So to answer your question, there will be both donations and potential properties that we want to purchase.
So that's how you're going to be structuring your letter to see if there's people willing to donate or sell.
Well, I'm going to start obviously with donations, right?
Okay.
If they're willing to donate, then that's kind of the route we're going to try to go. But
Yeah.
if it's strategic and we want to acquire the property, if they're not willing to donate, then we may have to buy it.
And Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion to allow that?
No, I don't think we made this a motion the last time. Am I correct on that? I apologize. I should know that.
I don't think there was a motion made at the last meeting about this.
I think it was more just an operational strategy. We're trying to be sure, though, that we don't do things without the commission's approval and how we want to do. And certainly your time that's going to be used to evaluate these requests. The letter of interest, by the way, there are some in your packet from the very first meeting, some template letters, and that's exactly right. The other thing, what you said is exactly right about, will you sell it, or are you interested in donating it, and that kind of thing. And the reason I asked Tiffany to come to the meeting today, too, is just to let you know that in the future there may be other sources of money as well. And as you said, Dennis, this is a work in progress. We're learning as we go. But I do think there'll be funds available to do things down the road.
Mr. Chairman?
Am I correct? So there wasn't a motion last time. Jeff, yes, sir.
Is it my understanding that the city at this present time does not have any property that they can initialize the bank at all? That we're starting from ground zero?
Can you answer that, Bill, at all, or?
The city does have an inventory of property, but we haven't identified any property on that list that we think would be something that would facilitate the efforts of the land bank at this time. But that's something that, Jonathan, you might, I don't know if.
Would it be appropriate just to review the inventory just the way we're going to do? That would be useful
good if you
information,
could
wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea. Thank you for that.
Get that information out to the members of the commission, and there might be something in there that piques an interest, and we could take another look at that.
Yeah, I think Rusty in engineering, Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I think Rusty keeps a booklet of properties that are owned by the city. I can send that out to y'all guys as well.
I think you need to just get the booklet and see which ones you want and tell the mayor we want those. No.
It's not really my call. That's what y'all are here for. I can provide y'all with the information, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure it's a group decision.
We want the best properties, Bill, right?
So I'll send it to y'all. I'll get with Rusty and get an updated list. and send that to y'all.
On a serious note, Jeff, that's a great idea, and we'll do that. John, look at it, back to you. But that might be another source to have an inventory early on. So that's a good thing. The next thing anything else about that strategy as far as letters of interest? Are y'all okay with us doing it the way we said? John's got another comment.
One more thing about that booklet, just to give you all a heads up, when you look through it, a lot of it's going to be properties that are already developed, like City Hall. It'll be properties that are in flood areas that I think engineering's planning on using for that. So you'll end up going through a lot of that booklet, and you'll see.
So we can't have City Hall, I guess.
Jonathan, I think it would be helpful if not only would you provide the booklet, as you said, but if you could kind of go through and say, this property may not be, just kind of give us some heads up on what's in there that might be suitable.
All right, we'll do.
So anything else about the letter of interest strategy that we'll use? So our intention at the next meeting is to bring the commission some properties to evaluate. So that'll be our really first official, we'll be up and running at that point a little bit. So that's our intention. The next item here kind of flows with this, and it's entitled Community Outreach, item C. And we feel like that at some point we want to go a little bit more public with this and reach out to certain entities about what we're trying to do and what our goals are. And I'm going to let John talk a little. We visited about that. You want to talk about some of that?
So one of the things Little Rock does really well is making sure the community's involved in whatever decisions they're making or whatever project they're working on. So I've already talked with a few of these. We want to start trying to reach out to neighborhood associations, nonprofits, civic clubs, anybody that we may be able to partner with in the future to do a project. And, getting back to the neighborhood associations, we want to make sure that they're on board with whatever we're doing before we just start. If you look through our criteria, I believe that's one of the things we have to address is making sure that they've contacted the association and they're okay with it. So anyway, getting to the point, if y'all guys have any groups or any nonprofits or any other associations that y'all want to meet with, feel free to send me their information. And we're going to start slowly meeting with these different groups and get their feedback on what they think we should be doing and how we can help their communities or whatever they're trying to do.
And when these presentations take place, each of you will get an invitation. And so feel free, if you would, to come to those various presentations and meetings with these groups and represent the commission, if you would do that. And there will be press at every one, so we won't be violating any meeting rules, I guess, if it ends up 2 or 3 of us being there. So it'll be okay.
And if you have any questions about what type of groups or organizations we can partner with for different projects, that list is in your priorities and policies that we've already been reviewing the first couple of meetings. So if you have questions, feel free to email me or call me, but there's a list already there.
I mean, you here today.
Mr. Chairman,
See the breath.
is there a list of neighborhood associations that are in Jonesboro presently?
I'm not aware of that, but I can tell you there are a few that I'm aware of. There's 7 or 8, and we're going to search for all the others. They had 123 in Little Rock neighborhood associations, so that would be a good list to know. Tiffany's out there smiling because she thinks she knows where they all are, but we neither one know where they all are. But we'll get you a list.
You can start with the CB certified grant. They have CBDTG. They have a long list of West End.
Yeah, and I was thinking Miss Emma would have a list. We need to get her. She's got a list. Tiffany's got a list over there too. I know she does. So, but she's out there. She's traveling around the world, but she can still give us a list. So we will get you guys as complete a list as we can, and then you guys can add to it if you know of some. But that'd be a great list to have, I think. All right. I think, is there further business? I think we've reached the time where we can have public comment. It's 3 minutes per person. If anyone wants to make a public comment, you're more than welcome. Mike, do you want to introduce Mike Downing? And glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And y'all know Daryl already and Bill over there. So our audience doubled from the last meeting, so we're pleased. All right, good deal. Anybody want to say anything? You're welcome to. Mike, sure.
I'm Mike Downing. I'm with Jonesboro Unlimited, but for the last 35 years, I've been in Missouri doing economic development and redevelopment projects, including things like in downtown Kansas City with Kansas City Live and St. Louis Ballpark Village and many other smaller redevelopment projects. So when I came to Arkansas, actually I was very surprised that the state doesn't allow cities to do some of the major incentive programs that are key to doing redevelopment, such as tax increment financing and property tax abatement. And also, there's very limited use of eminent domain for redevelopment. So we've got a challenge here. If we're really going to do redevelopment, a land bank is one of the components, but there are many components to successfully do redevelopment. And so appreciate your efforts on it, but just to, I guess I'm struggling with the issue about that in Arkansas because of the lack of resources to really do concentrated redevelopment like it needs to be done. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer that. The other thing is, as we talked about, the mayor appointed me to a task force for the corridor between ASU and downtown. We met the other day, have some other issues on it. Very challenging issue just because of the things I said. I've talked to several developers, and you know, if you're a developer, you want to not only make money, but you want to go into an area that has the least amount of, questions, and also has most traffic and disposable income. Well, redevelopment areas, for the most part, don't have that, and without financial incentives to offset those, it's going to be very difficult to redevelop areas like Aggie Road or south of railroad tracks and other places. We've got a big challenge in front of us, and you all are right in the middle of it. So I look forward to working with you all. Yes.
I agree with you 100%, of course. But I think it would be nice for this commission to have available what incentives there are available under Arkansas law. That's not something I'm really familiar with. And it sounds as from your discussion that it's very limited and there's not too many laws, incentives that are available that a city can use. Is that something that you have? Is that something that you have in a prepared format, or that you and your peers have discussed over the?
I can tell you that there's very limited use of tax increment financing based on a Supreme Court ruling in 2007, I believe it was, that greatly limited it and made it, in effect, unusable. The Constitution doesn't allow property tax abatement like almost every other state has. I mean, realistically, Arkansas is trying to do redevelopment with almost both hands tied behind your back. I mean, that's just how bad it is. And talking to the Municipal League and several attorneys, there is no appetite to try to change the Constitution to re-up some of those incentive programs.
Part of one of these areas is in the opportunity zone. Do you think that maybe an opportunity? I mean, we don't even know what the rules are, as far as I know. I'm not an accountant on the opportunity zone. I don't think they've established that. Do you guys know? And
they haven't issued the rules yet. There's been some speculation by some groups around the country about how effective that's going to be. I can tell you that just based on what I've seen, and I may be wrong but until they come out with the final rules, but the problem is, if I'm a developer, which you obviously know this, you're going to select the juiciest areas that have the most return on investment. Well, redevelopment areas aren't those areas. That's why you need special incentives to offset those costs. And unfortunately, the opportunity zones are drawn in such a large area, it can't concentrate the incentives in the areas that need it the most. So that's the flaw I see in that program.
This might be a question for Daryl, but there's been talk of impact fees, and if we had impact fees, it would not affect areas that are already developed. There's curb and gutter and streets in place. The impact fees would not affect that if I go in and bought that and wanted to, or would they? It would just be new development that I'm going in, and so that could be, one way to incentivize. I mean, it costs more to go out.
One could argue that impact fees would actually encourage the redevelopment of blighted areas because it's a little more expensive to do projects in the undeveloped areas.
That's your point, right? Yeah. Does anybody have some other questions? We didn't put Daryl on the hot spot here, but he's here as well if you have a question for him, or Daryl, if you have something you want to say to us as well. We're still in our school phase. We're trying to learn. So if y'all got something you want to share, we're glad to hear it. Tiffany's got something else to say. I can't imagine that.
You mentioned, Mr. Zulfer, about the neighborhood associations. We have received about 50 applications for our Jonesboro Neighborhood Leadership Program. It's an initiative of mayor to get more youth, to get more diversity on our boards and commissions. And another hidden component of it is to increase the neighborhood participation in our community. We have about 8 active neighborhood associations, 4 which are extremely active. And so the purpose of this program is to introduce everyday citizens into city government to give them a better understanding of what the city directors do. There's going to be a sit-down session of these individuals and their councilmen, and there's going to be a specific session on neighborhood associations, neighborhood watch programs, the differences in the two. And I'm going to invite each of the chairpersons for those neighborhood associations to come talk about their successes. Some are a little more successful than others. We have a neighborhood association that's actually a nonprofit. And so what they can do is apply for grant funding for their community. If we had all those active neighborhood associations, we could really revitalize our city. So that's kind of the purpose of the program. But we'll be making those announcements on the 20th. Of those 18 individuals who are going to be selected, we're going to pick 3 individuals from each of our 6 wards so to fairly represent the entire city. So
It's a good program.
So, hey, Tiffany, you stepped up like you want to educate me. So here, I know what a POA and a bill of assurance are, but I don't know what a neighborhood association is. So can you tell me and anybody else that doesn't know what that means?
I can actually invite you to that session, but I have a whole, I'm putting together the material right now for all the applicants. So a neighborhood association is a volunteer group organized within a certain boundary, and they actually set out those boundaries. And there are some things they can do. They can apply for nonprofit status, okay? They have a board of directors. The board are individuals who all live within those boundaries. A good example is the West End Neighborhood Association. And so Dr. Warner, take over.
No, I was just going to say the other thing that I think should be included, and I think you said this, is property owners associations are very similar to neighborhood associations, but as the West End, and since you brought that up as an example, doesn't have a defined area. So, 12 years ago or longer, we just picked the borders of it, and 1,750 households there. And sponsor a speaker program. There's a community garden. There's a cleanup once a year.
But there aren't
trying to
any
do
fees
community
associated with it. There aren't really, typically you don't see fees associated with a neighborhood association.
No, there are no fees. There is a membership criteria, which means you give your name and address. With this particular neighborhood association, there is a foundation, 501c3. And have gotten quite a few grants for City Water and Light Park as an example. Lighting, there's going to be some security cameras put up in this coming year.
And they're working on a couple others. They've been able to
other
apply for funding.
So it's just a way to build pride in a neighborhood and to get people on the same page. You can do so much more with a group of volunteers that are working together than individuals just doing their thing. So that's kind of the logic of it in my mind. But I think this curriculum that Tiffany's developed is well worth it. Would you send everybody, would you mind just to send your flyer so they can see
Yeah, I'll send
what
it
you're
to
doing?
Jonathan.
Jonathan will get it out to the commission.
He has it in his hand.
It's worth reviewing, but Tiffany's put a lot of effort into this. She's gathered up some funding and to have, it's a little bit of a model, if I'm correct, about the way that the
Yeah.
Citizen Police Academy has worked.
And
Build some
all of our
rapport with
local
that.
banks have sponsored the program, and so I'll publicly announce those next week, but it's zero taxpayer dollars in this program, all sponsored by our local bank, so that's a positive. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
No, it doesn't require a second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Well, thanks everybody for your time and effort.